And we're live. All right. Good to kick it off here. We got Brendan Sugrue from Bears Wire with us. I'm so happy I asked you how to pronounce that name because it's one that I have not encountered before. Do you know where your name comes from?
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
so happy.
welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
This is the
soft
That's
intro.
true.
Yeah,
That's true. No, I just want to say thank you guys so much. I'm a fan of both your works, and you're just two of I think one of the best people on Bears Twitter. So happy to be here. My name is actually very, very Irish. So I'm like
okay.
98, 99% Irish. So I think if you want like the historical part of my name, I think it's an old Viking tribe that then became Irish. So I like to say that it's an old Viking tribe, but not necessarily related to those, purple guys up north, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah.
It does sound much cooler saying you're from a Viking tribe.
It does, yeah. And I'm proud of my Irish roots, but it's just something cool to brag about every once in a while.
You know, my mom's maiden name is Brogan. She's probably watching this because she's #1 Bears fan, and so it's a very Irish name. And then we did that ancestry stuff, and came back, and like very little Irish actually came down to me. So it's a lot more like Scottish and Welsh and Norwegian and Swedish and stuff like that than it is actual. I mean, there's a little bit of Irish, but it's not nearly as much as I was brought up to believe. So it's kind of interesting. My last name's not Irish, so I guess I don't have that. But that's just interesting. It's an interesting pronunciation because it's not spelled that way.
No, it's not. Actually, while we're on it, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's 2 syllables, so it's Berckes.
Berckes. Okay.
Yeah. So don't listen to Bill Zimmerman. He mispronounces it. Plenty of other people mispronounce it. Some people put an I in there. Some people switch around letters. I've had an L thrown in there, and then 1 syllable a lot. I get that a lot where it's Berks, right? Like Traylon Burks or something like that. But no, it's 2 syllables, Berckes. Most people drop the C if they're trying to spell it. I've seen it all. Wiltfong is not a common name, but that's hard to mispronounce and hard to misspell, right? It's very
phonetic. It is mispronounced all the time. People leave off the T. My own father leaves off the T all the time. So it's like, if my own family can't pronounce it, I can understand why others struggle with it. But I get that, or I get they'll add different letters with an S. So, but I tell everyone just like it looks, and then that's easy. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So they say Wiltfong instead of Wiltfong.
Yeah. That's and I guess at some point, back in the day, one of my aunts did an ancestry thing, and it used to be Wildfang at some point in the history of the.
What? That's way cooler.
Why would you change that?
I know. I'm thinking. Well, the story, the way it was told to me, was we had a criminal somewhere in our deep dark past, and they changed the name. That's what I was told. It could be just my aunts and uncles blowing smoke, but. Well, who knows?
Wildfang would be an incredible name for a criminal. So I can kind of back up what this guy, assuming guy, did. I don't know what kind of criminal. Hopefully nothing too violent.
Something had to do.
We've all got a bank robber in our past somewhere, right?
Yeah, lycanthrope or maybe something like that. Who knows?
Oh man, this is great. I mean, this is the stuff that the podcast listeners don't get. They miss out on this early. Yeah, this is only YouTube stuff. So yeah, if you're joining us, I see we got a few people joining us tonight on a Friday night. Welcome. You made it to the weekend. We decided to kick off a little bit of a live stream here, record a podcast here in a little bit. Brendan was at practice, and so we'll kick that off in a bit. But before we get into the podcast, Brendan, any general thoughts that you want to talk about? Don't burn your list of things that you want to talk about, but any just atmosphere, anybody fun did you see anybody famous or anything like that?
Well, first off, atmosphere was great. This is my second practice in a year. So I went one last year, one this year so far. I'm hoping to make it to a couple more. It felt like a lot more packed this year. Maybe the Bears kind of loosened up the tickets a little bit. I don't know. Oh, yeah. No, I thought it was really, really nice. Like the weather was perfect. I don't know about famous people. I saw quite a few media members, got a chance to say hi to Mark Grody, saw Hub Arkish, of course, the Godfather, Larry Mayer.
We have a blood feud now with Larry Mayer.
You know what? Actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about that because I saw some posts and I was in Philly, on a work thing over the last week. So I was paying attention to Bears camp, but missed a few things. But what happened with you guys? Like there was some video stuff.
So we didn't take video.
Okay.
Okay. So the policy is you're not supposed to take video. It's posted, right? I don't know if you were tweeting out video or not, but if you did, you weren't supposed to. That was posted that, video was not allowed. And Lester and I were following the rules, but we got called out by a guy that looks like, a smaller version of Goldberg. And he was not the goalie from Mighty Ducks, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw him today. I know who you're talking about.
Okay, right. So he came up to that guy, somewhat intimidating, but not when you're hanging out with 6'6" Lester Wildfang, and and so he came up and he was like, "Hey, you guys need to cut it out now." And it was like, "This is not us. Like, whatever we are just taking pictures. I try to be very calm." And anyway, this big exchange went back and forth. Then a few minutes later, he called us down and called us off the bleachers. We again explained. We showed him our phone, all that kind of stuff. He was very reluctant, and he was like, "My media guy told me that you were doing this." And it was like, that's where the blood feud comes in now. And then another guy, his name was Rodney. Rodney called us down. It's like, YouTube now. And I was like, Lester, we're getting kicked out. And then that guy calmed down pretty quick when we showed him. He actually, I think, understood what Twitter was, whereas I'm not sure the first guy did. And he's like, "Oh, okay, I see what you're saying." Okay. And then he goes, "But you guys need to understand what it looks like to us. You guys are standing up there like that with your phones. It looks like you're recording video. And then people know who you are. And so they think it's okay for them to do it." And I'm thinking, yes, Lester and I are influencing all of the fans in the bleachers to take video and tweet it when we're not. If they know who we are, then they're following our account. I mean, we had that multiple times. We're like, "Hey man, I'm following your account right now." So just the idea that we somehow then we're influencing. And then Lester, would you like to give a little bit of an update?
So we, we work, SB Nation, Vox Media. We had our people reach out to the Bears and, because we're like, well, that was kind of embarrassing. The whole situation, 3 times being called out. People in the crowd thought we were bad. We were bad news. Oh, they're breaking the rules. We got the looks. We had some people, telling us, "Sit down, stop it." We're like, "Come on, we're not doing anything wrong," And so, I mean, even though we offered our phones up and said, "Hey, here's our feed, do what you got to do," apparently what happened was when our people talked to the Bears, the security guard said that we were rude and mean to them, and we would not show them our feeds. So that's why they said there's nothing they could do on their end. And we're not looking for nothing. Just sorry we embarrassed you in front of a few dozen people in your bleachers and the people that were around sitting around. I mean, that was a packed house, so it's kind of embarrassing. It would have been nice to have them and say, "Hey, our bad," but then they just lied about it. But it's okay. It is what it is. I'll be back there on Sunday, and I'm sure I'm going to see him again, and I bet he'll recognize me because I'm large, so he'll probably see me. And,
it's funny, and there were. So I did take one video, but it was only of Darnell Mooney catching passes from a jugs machine.
I saw that's why I did think I saw a video from you today.
Yeah, and that was during individual drills, so I figured, okay, if I take one, probably nobody's going to say anything. But then there's other sites, other podcasts that are putting out just reels and reels of stuff, and I'm like,
right,
is anybody going to say something? I'm not going to say anything about it, but hearing about you guys having issues, yet other sites who are, I will say, in my opinion, they do good work and they have a good following. Why are you guys being the ones called out?
I mean, I think because of, we're literally on the top bleacher. Yeah. Where, we kind of stand out and we're standing up the whole time. So it's easy. I mean, and then of course, the Twitter detective they showed us, "This is you right here." And I'm like, I know that guy. I'm not that guy. You know what I mean?
So you're saying that's not you?
I took a picture with him. I took a picture with the guy a little later in the day because I bumped into him on the bus just to kind of show them, guys, this is not me.
10 inches.
He does great work. Yeah, but I got a few inches on him. I got maybe 20 years on him, my guess is, and at least a good 100 pounds. So I'm like, come on, guys. But it's okay. It's in the past. Let's move forward. We're all Bears fans. Let's just let's get after it.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're joining us on the live stream, feel free to pop in some questions from wherever you're watching it from. We'll get to those at the end. We'll pop into a podcast starting recording here in a second, and we'll go from there. So let's start it up. Welcome to Bear and Balance. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined by the editor of that fine website, Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, we've got a special guest today
We
who was
do.
at camp. I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic for not being at camp this week, like we were last week. But how did the back to work week treat you?
The back to work week sucked. It always sucks, but but I am going back to camp on Sunday. But like you said, we do have a special guest, Brendan Sugrue from the Bears Wire, is joining us today. And Brendan, you were at camp today. That's why we wanted to bring you on, because fans want that firsthand experience. I want to know the stuff that's going on there. So, good time today at Hallis Hall for you.
What's up, guys? Yeah, it was a really good time. Myself and my co-host for the Bear Down Chicago podcast, Jack Wright, went, and we just had a great time. Beautiful weather, and I mentioned earlier to you guys, this is my second camp practice in a year. I went last year, and I think it's pretty interesting because during last year's camp with Matt Nagy, I went on one of the days where it was probably one of the most laid back practices, and they even said it. They only did they didn't do real hitting. They only did end zone work. And to contrast that, today was probably one of the most physical practices, both by my accounts and then hearing from what other players said. Because I kept thinking, I'm like, man, these guys are really, really getting after it. I was like, I don't remember this last year. And then, of course, afterwards, during the media session, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, Eddie Jackson all said, yeah, this was tough, but I'd say it was a fun practice. It was hard. I'd say it was hard for a lot of guys. Just they kept getting after it, doing a ton of different drills. We saw some scout team today, which was interesting. At first, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, wait, they have pennies on? Does that mean what I think it means? And so that was pretty interesting. But yeah, just a fun day at Hallis Hall. It was good to be back.
Now, I got a message from you earlier this morning where you were kind of freaking out, direct message on Twitter where you're like, where are the buses? And
Yes.
So just public service announcement for those of you that are going to camp and haven't been there yet, but have been there in the past. The buses are picking up from the other side of the Macy's on Vernon Hills Mall. So if you're going there and you're going to the same spot and you're hanging out and milling around with other people who are doing the exact same thing, they should just put a sign up, say, hey, maybe go around the other side. It's actually on the north side of the Macy's. So just, public service announcement to those of you who haven't been
Spoken like a true local, JB. I like it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think
good.
I even got the direction right. I think I did that right.
No, it's true. Yeah, last year it was right in front of the Maggiano's. I get there, nobody's there. I'm like, oh great, they moved the location, but now I don't know where it is. And yeah, I was like, who can I message that I know has been there already? I was like, oh, Jeff.
Did you do any of the Peyton Center stuff or take any of the pictures, or, they still had the Red Grange bobblehead doll up, I assume?
They do. Yes. I took, so I didn't go to the Walter Payton Center. That's like 2 years in a row. I'm like, hey, I think I want to do that. And then I'm like a small kid. I get distracted by shiny things once I get there. I'm like, oh, the pro shop. Oh, here's Staley. Oh, and I'm just going to look at everything. And then by the time I look at my watch, it's 15 minutes to practice and I want to stake out a good spot. But checked out the pro shop. There are still Mitchell Trubisky jerseys for $20 if you want them. I was a little disappointed because I was hoping the same thing would happen for Akeem Hicks jerseys.
Nope.
I really want an Akeem Hicks jersey, but they're still selling them at a pretty high price. Yeah, just kind of, it was similar to what we saw last year, only I love that they had food trucks this year.
Yeah.
I didn't actually get any food. I was just, I wanted to see
the
everything
idea.
with practice, but I love the idea. Yeah. People were taking
right.
advantage of it. I was a little bummed I couldn't get a beer after noon because, I like the idea of selling beer, and I know you're trying to be responsible by kind of cutting it off at a certain time, but I really don't want to drink beer before noon. And I want to hit it after practice, but that's all right. I got me a nice, fresh Deja Blue because that's the only place that I ever see a Deja Blue is at Bears games or practices.
Well, you got a beer tonight going. This is not Bears Over Beers, so I'm not drinking that. But you want to share your beer, since we can kind of just take care of that as well.
Sure
I love
thing.
it.
It is a Daisy
Okay,
Cutter Pale Ale.
yeah, good beer. All
I have
right,
no,
Yeah,
I have no idea
nice.
what that
Lester doesn't drink beer.
means.
The Wild Fang only drinks whiskey and Zima. That's it.
Iced tea tonight, my friends.
I was gonna say red wine, but
All right, so let's get into the show. So let's talk about the offensive line. We always start in the trench tribute. You had an article up on Bears Wire earlier today where you pointed out 6 guys that you thought stood out to you in camp. So why don't we start there? Who on the offensive line did you include in that article that's really stood out to you?
so it's kind of one of the obvious go-to answers here, but it was Braxton Jones, and for a couple reasons. One, he played every single snap at left tackle. So the Bears were rotating some offensive linemen, notably at right tackle, Riley Reef and Larry Borum. Those two were the notable ones that were getting time with the ones. Of course, Tevin Jenkins wasn't there, but as each practice goes along, it really seems like Braxton Jones is that guy at left tackle. And he was holding his own. He looks like he belongs, at least in practice, going up against guys like Trevis Gibson, Al-Qaedi Muhammad. Now, Robert Quinn didn't practice today, so you kind of don't get like the full scope of what he can do, but he gave Justin Fields enough time on multiple occasions. There was one play in particular where he was kind of getting pressured a little bit, but he held his own enough for Justin Fields to fire a pass, I believe, to Byron Pringle. But like you start to hear about these. Okay, Braxton Jones is continuing time with the ones. Is this actually going to be a realistic week 1 scenario? And now that you're seeing Riley Reef play more and more on the right side, it really seems like Braxton Jones is going to be the week 1 starter. Now, I really want to see how he performs in preseason against another team. And he's got a tough task against a really good 49ers defense if he is the starter against guys like Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. But for all intents and purposes, he looked good today. And he got, like I said, he got all the reps, which is, I think, the most important thing right now.
I think it's a testament to his work ethic, where the Bears went through the entire offseason program. Right before camp, they're like, we have to upgrade a tackle. Riley Reef comes in within I think a couple practices. He's with the ones with Jones rotating in, but it's Reef had the job for a few days there, and then at some point they're like, man, the coaching staff said Braxton Jones, I think he deserves the shot back. And since they made that switch, I think it was 3 practices ago, it's been Reef on the right side exclusively with Borum. And I mean, Braxton Jones, his tape coming out, he went to the 5th round, but it was a huge draft class. He got pushed down with like a lot of prospects did. I love the upside there, good feet, long arms. He looks the part of an NFL tackle, and everything you hear about his work ethic, his stuff off the field, his personality, his mentality about how he looks at the game. He doesn't look at the game. There was actually a podcast, our Making Monsters, a couple days ago. And we had his O-line coach on there, and he mentioned that Jones looks at the game, the full game. He doesn't just look at his responsibility as a tackle. He knows everyone's responsibility on that offensive play and the scheme, and he says that helps him be a better football player.
Oh yeah, you need to know what's going on. It's not your job, but you need to know the job of the guy next to you. It makes your job easier and to understand what's happening. The fact is, arms are, I think, like at least 2 inches longer than Larry Borum's and Tevin Jenkins. That alone says something. He does have, when you see him in person, he does have that physicality. And I think the biggest thing is, you mentioned Riley Reef spending time with the ones. He wasn't really getting pushed in those minicamp practices. He was primarily working as the first offensive tackle, at least on the left side. Now you bring in a veteran who has played a number of snaps. And Riley Reef isn't any slouch. Like, he's a decent, solid offensive lineman, maybe a little long in the tooth, but you bring him in to kind of push him a little bit, see what he can do. And for the coaches, Braxton Jones just, continues to ascend and, makes him more expendable, or I guess, put him at the right side and see what he can do with Borum. So I think that is probably my biggest takeaway there. Like, he got competition, and now he's, standing up to the competition and performing better.
Yeah, the Reef signing is only good for a guy like Braxton Jones, even if it's just as a mentor. Reef is known as a consummate professional, good locker room guy. He's going to be a good glue guy to that offensive line. And to me, it seemed obvious like, oh, okay, they're gonna let Braxton Jones sit behind Reef at left tackle.
Mhm.
They're gonna let that happen. They're gonna let Borum and Jenkins, whatever is happening with Jenkins. Jenkins fight it out for the right tackle, and that's kind of what the tackle is going to look like. And then with the Jenkins situation, where he hasn't practiced yet, we're getting some mixed messages here from the leaks of maybe he's going to get traded, and then Luke Getsy saying like, no, he's engaged. He's going to be good to go once he gets over this thing. And it's like, okay, I'm not quite sure what's real here.
Fingers
Right?
crossed.
Yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, hopefully that is what's happening. Maybe he did have some sort of injury that kind of kicked him back, and he just hasn't been able to physically go, and not all this other stuff. There's too much smoke there for there to be nothing. But
Yeah.
it kind of seemed like, well, if Jenkins isn't going to be there, then it really does seem like it's a Braxton Jones at left versus Larry Borum at right. Riley Reef plays whichever one is not going to win the job, right? I don't think it's a Braxton Jones versus Riley Reef as much as it's a Braxton Jones versus Larry Borum.
That makes sense.
I agree. And I really am struggling after seeing what I saw today. I'm really struggling to see how Tevin Jenkins finds a spot on this team, or at least even competes for a starting tackle position, because if they really thought that Tevin Jenkins was somebody who could at the very least compete, I think Riley Reef would be spending a little more time at the left side, kind of as that potential swing tackle or competing for one of the two spots. Now that he's just like going at the right spot and leaving the left tackle spot to to Jones, we know Tevin Jenkins isn't going to play left tackle. They made that crystal clear earlier in the offseason. His only spot, I feel like, is that right tackle. And now you're starting to get a logjam there with two other guys. So this is honestly one of the biggest mysteries in recent memory with the Bears, especially coming out of training camp. It is so odd. And injuries happen, but just like the smoke around it, the rumors coming out about his immaturity, him being on the trade block. I don't remember ever seeing anything like this.
I mean, I don't either. I think that the takeaway here, though, is that it's pretty clear that Ryan Poles did not like this offensive line,
Mhm.
and it would not surprise me to see if he replaces all 5 starters here, within 2 years. That would not be a shock. I could see all of his guys being in front of Justin as soon as 2023 rolls around. So if Braxton Jones is the first piece to win one of those positions, that won't surprise me. But I think that there's more coming, or those guys that Jatir Carter, maybe he steps in, Zach Thomas, learning behind Cody Whitehair, grooming him for next year. It just seems like this whole thing's going to be reset in 2 years, which, quite frankly, you can defend that decision making by Ryan Poles.
Hey, did you get a chance much to see anything at center? I mean, I know Doug Kramer's been getting some reps there with the ones along with Sam Mustipher. Does it look like they're settling into one guy or the other at that center spot, or is it still kind of like up in the air right now?
I think it's up in the air. It seems like yesterday or 2 days ago, Doug Kramer was primarily rolling with the ones. Today, It was pretty much Sam Mustipher. I thought the interior looked okay. The issue I had was, and this is kind of going back to my experience with last year, I was on the end zone. So I saw some of the offensive line that was great, like especially coming towards me. Little bit blocked a little bit. My view was obstructed by some of the players, but it seemed for the most part, Sam Mustipher was the guy at center right now. And I thought he looked okay. I mean, there wasn't like too many like blown up plays right at the line of scrimmage. Thankfully, Justin Fields, or I guess whoever was playing quarterback, they had a little bit of time to actually do something. But yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow if Doug Kramer switches out and, see what they're doing there with Lucas Patrick being out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know that they're going to trust rookie to take snaps here just for a game or two. I mean, I think you can make the argument that you let Sam take over for the short term until Patrick gets back. Patrick's going to miss probably 1 or 2 games, I would assume, if the timelines were correct. So it makes a little more sense with a guy that has some experience. Maybe take that on, and not a green rookie who, to me, looked like he needed a little bit more seasoning before you put him on the field. But
Yeah.
it could be wrong. So let's move on to Justin Fields. I don't know what your experience was with the fans. There just seems to be, this is a budding superstar in the making. But we added the Fields report when Fields started to start games last year, just kind of reviewing what he had done in the game and taking a specific focus on him. So continuing that with camp here. So what was your impression of Justin's practice today? Anything stand out to you? Did he have a good practice, down practice? Basically, how was he?
I thought he had a mixed practice, and it depends on where he was at the field, on the field. So when the Bears were kind of in the middle of the field where he had more room to work with, I thought he was really, really good. I mean, you probably saw the highlight of the deep ball to Velus Jones off the play action pass to David Montgomery. Velus just beat Dane Cruikshank, and Fields dropped it right in the bucket. It was probably the best throw we had all day. Of course, the offsides call. I mean, how many times have we seen over the last few years Bears quarterbacks get the defense to jump off sides and then just spike the ball on the ground and take the 5 yards? Fields actually turned it into a long play to Equanimeous St. Brown. He beat his defender easily. It seemed like the defender actually gave up, but just taking it up over the top. So I thought on some of his deep patterns, he was pretty good. He missed one other deep one to Equanimeous, same sort of route that Velus ran. It was a flag route. But I thought overall in those longer field situations, he was really solid. When you got towards the red zone, that's where some of the issues came across, in my opinion. And what I was seeing was Fields was locking in too much on Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney. There was one play in particular that stood out to me because it was right in front of my face. Fields is scrambling to the right. N'Keal Harry's wide open in the back of the end zone. He's got a good, I'd say 2 or 3 seconds where, you could fit a ball pretty good in there to, have a chance at a touchdown, probably get a touchdown. Fields doesn't see it. Instead, he tries to force the ball towards Darnell Mooney on the sideline. He was well covered, broken up. So that was kind of disappointing. And you just saw him kind of try to, work a little too much towards Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney and maybe not utilize his other receivers. So that shows he's really starting to get a chemistry with those guys, but I'd like to see him do a little bit more with the other guys, especially when you're trying to score. In terms of I saw a lot of scrambles from him. He was rolling out of the pocket. There were a few coverage sacks. Unfortunately, I thought the defensive backs did a pretty solid job overall. They were really trying to work on his scrambling in certain situations. I thought there was a really cool drill they were doing outside of team drills where they were actually just having the quarterback run upfield and work on those quarterback designed runs. All the quarterbacks were doing it. So you saw Fields, Peterman, and Simeon. So
a little bit of a difference there as athletes.
What's that?
A little bit of a difference there as those athletes.
Yeah, a little bit. You definitely see a big difference with Fields when he's moving. But I thought something like that was unique, and nice to see that they're really they're embracing Justin's strengths and athleticism. I know Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy came out the other day, I believe, and said, we're trying to get him to throw from the pocket, but we're also not trying to limit what he can do outside of the pocket, kind of striking that fine line. So I thought that was pretty good in practice today. You saw him go through his reads, go through his progression. Again, you just wish that maybe he spread the ball around a little bit in the end zone because that was pretty much the only areas where he really struggled, in my opinion.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about the flag, the penalty in the defense. You're right. So many times in years past, we've seen Bears quarterbacks not take that free play. But then when you watch the Packers, for example, and Aaron Rodgers, he lives off those free plays. He takes the deep shot every chance he gets. So this has to be some of that Luke Getsy influence coming over from Green Bay. When you're around greatness like he was for so long in Green Bay, some of that rubs off on you, and some of that it's going to be also imparted on Justin Fields. And this is just it's a small thing you mentioned, but man, when you said it, I'm like, man, it's so good to hear that he's doing something that is so common in today's NFL, but something the Bears haven't been doing.
Absolutely. And I think it's both. It's Getsy and it's Fields' mentality. Because Fields, he's a killer, man.
Yeah.
Remember last year during the Packers game, he thought, and he should have gotten that defensive offsides where he threw the ball deep. He was trying to go for the home run, turned out to be intercepted, and it was a missed call. But so we have seen it before, but this time, I mean, he put it right on the money. And I'm sure with Luke Getsy in his ear, seeing, what he's seen with Aaron Rodgers over the last few years, that's going to be commonplace. And it's also good to see that Fields is working on his hard count, continuing to get defensive lines to jump across, and then of course trying to take advantage of that.
I love it.
Yeah, he's a big game hunter. I mean, I think that if this all comes together, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I know, the offensive line might not be where people want. I put out a tweet earlier this week, and I was like, look, first week of pads, they clearly have not settled the offensive line positions. That matters, right? I mean, the offensive line is not an individual game. It is a team. It is a team within a team. And those 5 guys need to learn how to work together. They need to learn their line calls. I'm not saying they're going to be great, but there's a path for them to have 5 guys on the field that can play. And if that happens and they learn how to play together, they can do okay. And so it's early in camp. Don't freak out, people. But that will hopefully give Fields some time. And you've got a legitimate system that's not all curl routes. And I think that this wide receiving core I know it's not full of top line talent, but I think there's enough veteran presence with enough interesting guys that, like Velus, I think it looks like he's ready to play right away. I think there's enough there that there can be some interesting offensive performances. And at this point, as a Bears fan, it's kind of all you can hope for.
That's all I want.
Yeah. I think the biggest concern there is with who we mentioned earlier, Lucas Patrick. It just stinks that, here's a guy that I sound like Chris Collinsworth. Jesus.
Here's a
guy.
It's okay.
You talk about Lucas Patrick. But Lucas Patrick, he's supposed to be the center. You need to work on that timing. You need to work on that cadence with a new quarterback. So I think there could be, assuming he can make it back for week 1 or week 2, there could be some growing pains there. Hopefully the ends of the line with the tackles get straightened out, but that interior, I think it's going to just be a work in progress. Like you said, it's going to take time, but these guys are going to gel at some point. We do see it. And I think with the coaches that are in place and kind of stressing the different kind of line play that we want to see, or they want to see, it's going to happen. I think there's those first few weeks, it just could be a lot of growing pains, unfortunately.
It's to be expected, though. I think like it was a good tweet that he had, earlier this week. It's these guys, they are coming together. It's going to be a progress, and it may not really start clicking until somewhere in the season. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen probably in camp. It may not happen in preseason. A lot of people have preached patience. That's what the Bears are in. They're in a preach patience mode right now. They're resetting the roster. It's a ton of new guys, and it'll take some time. But I think I think we're all excited at the future if things, especially with Justin Fields, if he's being that guy, it's going to be fun.
We'll take a quick break here. We'll let somebody pay the bills. We'll come right back. All right, we're back. So let's talk about your top offensive and top defensive players from this practice. Now, again, it's one practice, and this is the only practice that you've been to. So, you've been following other people that have been at practice. You've been reading all the practice reports and all that kind of stuff. But this was with your eyes. You got to see this team. They're in full pads, which I'm jealous. I didn't get to see contact. That makes me feel sad. But who stood out to you as your top offensive player today?
So a few guys, definitely. And at certain points of practice too, I think a few different guys shined. I don't know if there was like a consistent, and maybe aside from Fields, a consistent performer, but right off the bat, Trestan Ebner, that guy has quickness. He has speed. He was juking guys. He had a really, really solid long run I think it was one of the first plays of team drills. So it felt early in the morning, but a lot of guys compare him to, he's the new Tariq Cohen. I don't necessarily agree with that. Obviously he's bigger. I think he's stronger. He's kind of a mix between Cohen and somebody like David Montgomery who can take a hit, but his elusiveness, I think is going to be a really big asset to this offense and special teams. So right off the bat, he shined for me. I thought Velus Jones, again, with that deep pattern was awesome, but I didn't see too much of him after that, which was a little disappointing. I think all of the running backs actually were solid, though. Going back to Ebner, you saw David Montgomery get a load of the carries. He was taking contact. He was running hard like usual. Khalil Herbert, of course, right behind him, showing that vision. I thought he ran solid. And then Darrington Evans, like that's a guy you don't want to forget about. It's going to be a big battle between him and Ebner for that third running back spot. I really do hope they keep 4 because I think all those guys can be assets. I'm not sure if that's possible, as well as keeping Kari Blasingame. But the running backs seem to be pretty good. And I thought they really made an emphasis on running the ball today. Cole Kmet had a solid practice. I think there was one play that stood out. There was one play that stood out to me that it really benefited the defense more, where Jaquan Brisker punched the ball out. I know we're talking about offense, but Cole Kmet was targeted early and often, and I think he showed some of his physicality, trucking guys a little bit and using his size to his advantage across the middle. So he looked pretty good. I just wish he looked a little bit better in red zone, but I could say that for pretty much everybody.
It's funny when you mentioned Kmet. As a rookie, I think he made the angry run segment on NFL Network a few times. We didn't see too much of that last year. Part of it was how he was used. We already talked about the excessive curl routes, so it's kind of hard to, if you're a guy that big that takes a while to get going, you're not going to truck anybody if you catch the ball and when you're standing still. So I'm excited to see Cole Kmet. I'm excited to see his progression. I talk about it a lot on Twitter and in some private messages, Twitter chats we have. He's a young guy. If he's maxed out at his potential right now at 23 years old, a 60 catch guy, he's an okay blocker. If this is who he is, that's fine. But I mean, if you can't progress up, see the progression that he could take, there's another step to take there. I mean, he's not done, and his NFL career is not over. There's another step for him to take, and I don't know how big it'll be, but I know that he's with a coaching staff that they know how to use him. That's the big positive with Kmet and this staff.
Yeah, I think the biggest asset with Kmet early on, I think, was his run blocking. He was really, really good in that area. And the best word, I was talking to a guy at camp today, the best word I can use to describe Cole Kmet in the passing game is clunky. I think the way that he runs is a little clunky. Like, it's not as fluid as it needs to be. It's not as smooth as it needs to be. He looks leaner this year. And I'm sure you've seen that in pictures, but like even just seeing him standing and kind of running routes, he looks leaner. He looks a little bit smoother. Granted, it is only practice, but I'm really excited to see what the staff can do with him to hopefully better, round out his route, not round, but, smooth out his routes a little bit and possibly take over that Robert Tonyan role that we saw in Green Bay, where Tonyan just was a beast in the end zone. He maybe only got like 500, 600 yards during the season, but he was always a threat to catch a touchdown. And again, Cole's got the size. He can do it if he's put in the right position. And like you said, Lester, when you're running curls and especially when you're running routes on third and 23, I mean, what are you going to do? There's no hope.
This is hashtag Swole Kmet. This is Kmet season. We have become a Kmet fan podcast somehow.
I think it has happened. Yeah,
and
it's my fault. I'll take blame for that.
No, I was there for 3 days, and my first day, I was like, Cole Kmet, looked pretty good.
Yeah,
and, I've been getting some grief about it, but because go back to the draft. I didn't want Cole Kmet. I wanted Antoine Winfield Jr. Sure, it didn't happen, right? So Cole Kmet's a Bear, so I've been cheering for him, right? There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with a tight end taking a little bit of time to develop, because that's a really hard position to learn, and you have to be able to do multiple things well, and to be a good tight end, a round tight end here, and it's not surprising that going into his third year, he looks like he might take a step. That's generally what happens with most tight ends. You don't get spoiled. Kyle Pitts. Oh, he's a tight. Yeah, okay. He's just a giant wide receiver that they call a tight end, which is going to financially probably hurt him down the line. Travis Kelce. Okay, well, yeah, he's not going to be Travis Kelce. Fine, but can he be that step below Travis Kelce? Travis Kelce's going to the Hall of Fame. So can he just be like a really good tight end? It's possible. Maybe we just need to give Cole Kmet a chance to see what he does this year. That's all.
Real quickly, what would you guys think if he had a career like Kyle Rudolph?
Perfect.
Sure,
it's not bad.
Good player.
Yeah,
not great, but good player. So nothing wrong with that.
10-year pro, a couple Pro Bowls, I'm sure as alternates, but he'll catch, 40, 50, 60 balls for you every season. He's a threat. He, like we talked about, his red zone production has to pick up, but I think the key for Cole Kmet, especially in this offense, and that's something he talked about in the offseason, was he wanted to really improve his blocking. If he can show that he could become an above average blocker, and look, he's 6'5", he's 260. He added some muscle mass this year. He has thinned down, but he's in better shape, and he wants to become more aggressive as a run blocker. If he can hone that part of his game, that's going to be a huge fit for this offense. And the target share should not be there. He should not be getting targeted as much as he was targeted a year ago. But I think his catch percentage could probably increase because he's now not going to be used like he was used in years past.
Yeah. And again, situationally, like when you're deep in your own end zone and you're running those 3rd and 20s, the last thing you want to do is give it to a tight end like Cole Kmet. That's just it's not smart football, but totally agree with what you said. Like he is absolutely going to be counted upon for run blocking with this sort of offense. They are going to run the ball, take a break, run the ball again, and just, continue to pound it down your throat. So yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment.
We've seen the PG-13 version of Cole Kmet where he never scores. Let's see the rated R version.
Nice.
Well done.
All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. You mentioned Jaquan Brisker earlier, having a punch out. He's had a good camp. I mean, I was super impressed with Brisker. I thought Gordon, played pretty well, looked pretty good for a rookie corner, but I was like, I really like Brisker. It was very easy for me to get behind Brisker. So I kind of jumped at you saying that, but you mentioned somebody else in your article today. So who else is popping off for you in the defense, and who would you say your top player was?
Yeah, and I feel kind of dirty doing this because I've been very high on him ever since he signed with the Bears, but Tavon Young looked pretty good today. And I think he was put in an advantageous situation because you had Kyler Gordon out, you had Kindle Vildor out, both of who had been taking starting snaps, Gordon at the nickel corner spot and Vildor at the other outside corner spot opposite of Jalen Johnson. So in comes Tavon Young and Lamar Jackson, who again has had a pretty good camp. So he was getting some solid.
JB.
Lamar Jackson is my guy.
He was pretty solid today too. But Tavon Young, he was effective in the run game. He put Darnell Mooney on his ass, and he also tipped a pass from Fields that led to a near interception from Eddie Jackson in the end zone. I mean, Tavon Young, he's been a solid nickel corner. The biggest issue with him is his health. Right. And he's still relatively young. This is a chance for him to really kind of reset his career. He's on a prove-it deal. And I'm kind of disappointed that Gordon didn't play today because I really wanted to see how he performed, especially if they were going to keep him in this nickel corner spot. I'd personally like to see him on the outside. I think he'd be effective there. I understand that NFL offenses, they're running all those types of receivers. You're going to be in that nickel and dime package like a ton. But seeing Tavon Young kind of ball out was really nice. And he was my pick to be the starting nickel corner, even competing against Thomas Graham. And he's been out for a while, unfortunately. But it was good to see him perform. And yeah, Jaquan Brisker, like when I tweeted out that he punched the ball out from Cole Kmet, and I'm sure you guys will appreciate this. Half of my mentions were, well, it was just Cole Kmet dropping the ball. This was a completed catch, my friends, and Jaquan Brisker peanut punched that thing right out, and the defense celebrated accordingly. It was a good catch. Jaquan Brisker just made a better play, and it seems like he's doing that every single practice, and I'm so excited to see this young man play. He just has that ball hawk mentality. I think he's going to make the entire defense better. I think the secondary overall looked pretty good. And even being down a couple guys like that, I'm really, really excited to see how they perform against other wide receivers not on their team and in, a preseason format.
It's funny because there was such a weakness a season ago. And now in one season, you even have the guys that are perceived, at this point anyway, as backups playing pretty good in training camp. So it's a nice problem to have if you end up cutting a guy that you were counting on playing because the young guys, outperformed him. And you talk about the peanut punch mentality. It was there the whole time I was at camp as well with JB. Every single play, those defenders are coming at the ball. They want it, and it's a beautiful thing as Bears fans because we want those turnovers. We would love hearing the guys on the TV talking about the peanut punch. More elevation of peanut punch. Let's get him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and not only that, but just the physicality too. So Eddie Jackson was a guy that stood out in that sense. He was going after David Montgomery. Those two, I don't know if there's like a frenemy relationship there. They just are good competitors. But there was one time Ejax kind of popped David Montgomery on a run. And then as they were getting in red zone work, Montgomery's pushing towards the end zone and Ejax and them are going at it a little bit after the whistle. And I'm like, you know what? I like this mentality. I want to see that from Eddie Jackson. I want to see that fight. I want to see that, competitiveness come out, and, they adapted up after they were good. It wasn't like a scrum or anything, just two guys that were really trying to, one of them trying to score, the other one trying to keep him out of the end zone. And that was really pleasant to see, especially from a guy like Eddie Jackson, who he's been dogged a lot over the last couple of years for his tackling abilities, and rightfully so. I get it. But I think he really put out the effort today. And again, just really good to see that from him.
I just want to go back, Brendan, to what you said earlier about Gordon, and you didn't get the chance to see Gordon. So I think that what I have seen, or what I saw in the early camp, and this may have changed, don't get me wrong, but I think some Bears fans are like, "What, the first pick is just going to be the nickel?" I think what's happening is that the idea is Gordon's going to be on the field. And he's going to play outside corner if you're running, a base defense, just meaning four defensive backs. And then if they go into the nickel, they like the idea of him being able to slide down. So to me, it seems like we have a Kindle Vildor at outside corner versus Tavon Young / Thomas Graham, if he ever gets healthy, at nickel. So the idea is Gordon's going to be on the field in one of those two corner spots when they play nickel, and the other spot is open for one of those other guys to step up, or it could be matchup dependent, right? Where they say, "Hey, we really think that we're gonna see a lot of 11 personnel. The offense is gonna put 3 wide receivers out, and they're gonna put a slot guy that is a little taller. They're gonna put like a power slot in. We want Gordon on him because we don't think Graham or Tavon Young matches up well, and we're gonna put Vilder on the outside." Or the next week, it's actually we feel pretty good about Young matching up against this shiftier slot wide receiver, so we're going to just keep Gordon on the outside. I think that's where the competition is, not so much Gordon only playing nickel.
I would agree, and I really wish I could see it in action. But I was talking to another Bears podcaster today, Duke Coughlin, who was out there, and he pretty much said the same thing. He's like, "Yeah, Jalen Johnson's probably going to be one of those guys. He's strictly going to play on that one side of the field." We saw him last year try and shadow some of the bigger top end receivers like Cooper Kupp, like Devontae Adams, and move that to the slot. And that's where the Packers specifically have killed us. And he had mixed results. And I think Jalen Johnson is much better as an outside corner. So then you bring in that versatility with Gordon, like you said. If there's a top end wide receiver that he can shadow more or less that moves to the slot, then you put Gordon there. You have somebody like Vildor on the outside, and then he moves back to outside. And like you said, with Graham or Young in the slot. So, I would agree. And I think that's going to help. I think Gordon, without seeing him practice yet, I think he could have that ability to kind of shadow that top wide receiver. And I mean, we haven't had a guy like that in a long, long time, even with Fuller and, Jalen Johnson here. We haven't seen that since Charles Tillman, like 10 years ago.
Well, good stuff, Brendan. I really appreciate you coming on here. Where can people find your stuff? I mean, you're on Twitter, you're writing articles all the time. So where can people go find you?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter at Brendan Sugrue. That's Sugrue. Check out my work on Bears Wire. So you can follow Bears Wire or bearswire.com. And then I also host a weekly podcast called the Bear Down Chicago podcast with Ryan Dangle, Jack Wright, Patrick Sheldon, and Logan Bradley. So definitely check out our episodes. We'll have an upcoming one this Monday. So thank you guys so much. It's such a pleasure to talk with you guys. Like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of both of you, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I think, Lester, you're one of the best writers out there, and JB, getting to know you over the last few years and seeing your work has been awesome. So it really is a pleasure to come on with you guys. I really appreciate it.
That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's we don't get a lot of compliments, so certainly.
Bears people are just yelling at you at practice now.
That's all it is.
Practice. Well, stick around for the YouTube crowd when get a little Q&A here. Looks like we got some of those, but we'll close out the podcast here, guys. We're really appreciate you listening to this show, and we got a ton of stuff, man. I mean, the Taylor show, Making Monsters, was awesome this week. Make sure you're checking that out. Lester and I are going to be back on Sunday. No, it's me and Jacob on Sunday. Yeah. Lester's going to be at practice, but it's actually just Jacob Infante and I will recap Sunday's practice. He's going to that one. So we'll be here covering that practice. We'll continue to try to bring you as many practice coverage as we can. And we're getting closer to the season. We're getting closer to our lineup. We're getting closer to a fun announcement. And so stay tuned. I know they all will like that. Follow us on Second City Gridiron YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at GridironBorn, at Wiltfong JR. And until next time, bear down. All right. What do we got for comments?
We got Dead Master Ken is in there today.
Yes.
Daz Newsome versus Dante Pettis for that last receiver spot. What do you guys think?
Well, Dante Pettis didn't practice today. He was one of the notables that missed out. Daz didn't really flash in the passing game. He had a few end arounds, I think. But you know what? I'm going to throw a name out there. Chris Finke. Chris Finke looked pretty good today. I'm not going to lie.
He was in your article. I saw you mention in your article. I'm like, he's going to bring up Chris Finke. And, Bears fans are going to be like, I knew it. That's the guy.
So I got a buddy. He's part of the Irish Bears show. I'm sure you guys know. Ant Cork Bears fan, and he's the biggest Daz Newsome fan. And there was nothing more that I wanted to do than give him a highlight from Daz Newsome. And he was out there. He's moving, but Chris Finke kind of stole the show. So I want to see more from Daz. I like that he's getting a full training camp this year because he didn't get it last year. And hopefully that means some more time in the preseason. But yeah, Chris Finke and Nathan Peterman have something going. I think you're going to see a few highlights from them. I'm sorry, it's true. They were working.
And Peterman,
two guys that are going to get cut have something, have a good connection. I hope that they play well in the next XFL together.
That's the next Ken. Was it Ken Mistroli? Is that the former Bear legendary preseason guy? Yeah, wow, it's going to be fun here.
Yeah.
Well, Ken threw a bunch up. So
Ken's
fired up. I'm going to give you some rapid fire Den Master questions. So did you see anything from the new linebacker, Nicholas Morrow?
Nothing that stood out. He was there. He was, of course, playing the mic. He showed up to me. He showed up more in the run game than the pass game. Maybe that's not totally surprising. But he was just kind of there. It was interesting to see, so Adams was the other starter opposite with Morrow, especially with Roquan out, who was there again. He was involved in the linebacker meetings, just hanging out with the shades, had his jersey on, no pads, obviously, but he's there. But yeah, not much for Morrow, unfortunately. Just not like splashy plays. I mean, he's there, he's helping taking out ball carriers, but just nothing that stood out, unfortunately.
That's kind of what I noticed too when I was there, and I don't know if it's the same for you, JB, but I was hoping to see more from him. He was a guy they basically signed. He's been running the mic, the entire offseason. He has the green dot. He's the play caller. He's familiar with the style of defense, and I was hoping to see more. But maybe we'll see him pop more when he has a better player next to him. Right now, I think he's running with. You talk about Adams. The other linebacker, I think, is maybe Joe Thomas getting some of those reps, and that's
Sanborn.
Jack Sanborn.
Yep. I mean, it's not a lot there. I mean, the Bears did sign a linebacker today. It was all 2022 USFL, an all-star, DeMarcus Gates, and the scouts say he was probably the best linebacker in the USFL. he's never really played in the league. He's played in 6 different leagues actually, if we're counting.
Wow.
So,
Oh, man.
I looked it up today. I did the article real quick before I came on, and I'm like, man, this guy's been around. Hey, man, good for him. His dream's alive. He's going here. And,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I mean, if he did have a nice year in the USFL, I look up his numbers. And like I said, I looked at some of those people that scouted him a little bit, and maybe he'll surprise. I mean, who knows? I mean, you always see those undrafted, those unheralded guys. Every team has a guy that pops that you never expect to pop. And the Bears could use one.
Linebackers, running backs. I mean, you see it.
Yeah.
Those guys can slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
You mentioned Roquan. So, question for you, Brendan: what do you think the hold in, as I like to call it? Ken says the holdout. When does that really start to hurt the team? Like, how much longer can he realistically keep holding in before it hurts the team?
I think leading up to week 1, and I know Roquan's he would play a different position, but it is one of those positions where you just kind of you run and get the ball. Roquan's a veteran. He knows what's expected of him. He's played in a number of coverages already. He looks like he's in good shape. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. I do want to know if there's actually like an injury related to this. Some of these things with this team, man, it's so weird. Like the Tevin Jenkins stuff, and then you have Roquan Smith on the PUP list, but it's technically a holding. I'm sort of, and maybe this is ignorant of me, so maybe I'm not right here, but I'm basically saying after the 3rd preseason game, then I'm getting worried. I know Matt Eberflus wants to play all of the starters. He wants to get them comfortable, and maybe there are some things where Roquan's out of position come week 1, but I think he is a smart, instinctual linebacker. He'll be able to find those spots pretty quickly. So if we get to the 3rd preseason game and nothing's happening, then I'm worried.
The Bears need him. I mean, he's the best player on that defense. The whole situation, like you said, it's just an odd situation. Like, why would you just not pay him? You have money in the cap. You got plenty of money next year in the cap. You can sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal. He's still 23 years old. Come on. This is a no-brainer. He's one of the better linebackers in the game today. You got to pay somebody.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a few things here. One, he doesn't have an agent, so that's a unique situation right there. 2, Roquan is, by all intents and purposes, he is one of the top like off the ball linebackers in the league, but he's not recognized as that. He doesn't have those accolades. And I knew when he was snubbed for the Pro Bowl and even the All Pro, like he got 2nd All Pro, but some of that stuff definitely hurts in contract negotiations. We don't know what the numbers are, but I can almost guarantee you he wants to be that first $100 million linebacker and make $20 million a year. And I'm sure the Bears are saying, hey, we only want to pay you like maybe 16, 17 annually and maybe like 85, 90 million, or I'm not sure what the numbers are. I'm just guessing. But, I think some of that stuff plays a factor, and hopefully we've seen it with Ryan Pace come in at the last, coming in right before midnight after the last preseason game. They sign a guy to a contract extension. Maybe that's going to be Ryan Poles' mantra as well. That it happened with Jaquan Brisker going into camp as a rookie, but just pay him. You're right. There's so much cap space. He's one of the key leaders on defense. He's one of the key proven players on defense that you want to have for a long time. I don't understand it either.
I'm going to start to worry a little bit if it's after the first preseason game, actually.
Okay.
I'm fine with missing the first preseason game. And the second preseason, they're actually really close. I think they're actually only like 4 or 5 days apart. So maybe I can kind of live with, but I feel like it needs to be signed within that time period. I really don't. He needs to play the 3rd preseason game. Let me put it that way. If he's not out there for the 3rd preseason game, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
Same.
Last one from Ken, real quick. He wants to know, pick your wide receiving core, the Bears wide receiver room or the Packers.
Yeah, I'm going to go the Bears, and I know that's the homerism in me, but Sammy Watkins is always hurt. Allen Lazard, I think he's a solid receiver, but I don't know how he's going to perform without Devontae Adams. Randall Cobb is a shell of himself. Christian Watson, I think could be. I'm really high on Christian Watson, but I think he's a raw kind of guy. I think he's going to take time to develop. And Darnell Mooney is just seeing him move and seeing him get in front of coverages. Like, he is the real deal. I know it's probably, we've talked about it at nauseum. Bears fans are really, really high on him, and I think they should be. I think he's a guy, he's going to eclipse what he did last year. He's got that rapport with Fields. I think they're going to find ways to creatively use Velus Jones. I really think Equinemius St. Brown actually, I mean, you guys probably saw him. That guy's massive. And I think if you put him in the right situations, he's going to be a mismatched nightmare. Byron Pringle, all he does is find ways to get open and score. When he was with Kansas City, I think maybe he doesn't have the same production here in Chicago, but he's still a young kind of guy who has had success when he's been given the opportunity. I just don't see I see an injured, older, and unproven Packers wide receiving core, and I'd take the Bears over them.
I agree right now. You mentioned Watson. They have another rookie that's standing out. That's Romeo Dubs, who's had a nice camp from what I understand. And I know some Packer people, and they're all pretty high on him. But what was he, a third round pick? I'm not even sure where he ended up going. But he's a guy that I thought the Bears probably would take a flyer on. And of course, the Bears went DB Velus. So, there's a lot of these receivers as Bears fans we're going to be watching around the league. Alec Pierce with the Colts, Watson, Pickens, we're going to be watching all these other receivers. So, Velus Jones better be that guy because, or otherwise, how Bears fans are. They'll pull their receipts.
It's already happening with Pickens.
Yeah. Camp reports from Pickens look good. But all right, last question from the T3P podcast. Wanted a Mario Edwards update. Do you have one?
He was running with the twos today. Saw him once make a decent play. I can't remember against who. But yeah, he was another kind of guy. He was there. Didn't get any reps with the starters. So he's kind of firmly entrenched with those number twos and those reserves. So I don't see that changing, even with, I guess, with Angelo Blackson coming back. But even with Kyrus Tonga, he was a little bit banged up, I believe. But yeah, he just running with the twos, unfortunately, so far. We'll see if that changes.
I think Edwards is a good pro, though. He's going to give you he'll give you something this year. Like when you least expect it, there'll be a Mario Edwards sack in a weird game where you're like, oh, that was a good play by him, because he has done it in his career. He's pretty good. He's just at this point in his career, he's not going to be starting for you. He's going to be a nice fill-in reserve, maybe that NASCAR package that some teams do where they put guys in that kind of get after the quarterback, and he'll have a role on this team somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Hopefully
package.
Yeah. Hopefully not having penalties either.
Yeah.
This team seems like, hopefully if they make penalties, they're aggressive penalties. I can see that being, part of their mentality of just kind of going pretty aggressive and maybe getting a little too aggressive at times. I could see the penalties coming from there, but that hits philosophy, the play smart, that's a lot of it too. So, I don't know. I've got a lot of hope for that philosophy paying off. I know that some people are worried it'll burn players out, but I don't know. They seem to be buying into it the 3 days that I was there, and I think that plays. So that's it for questions. Again, Brendan, thanks for sticking with us. Doing a little overtime there, and we'll end it here with the live stream. Thanks everybody for joining us on a Friday night, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, guys.